There becomes a moment in every soul's journey when the life you've built no longer fits the person you're becoming. A moment where your intuition grows louder than your fear. When the signs become impossible to ignore. When the masks begin to fall away and you realize you were never lost, you were remembering. Welcome to the Heyoka Shaman Podcast, a space for seekers, healers, empaths, mystics, survivors, and old souls navigating the path of awakening. Together, we'll explore spirituality, intuition, shadow work, healing, consciousness, energy, transformation, and what it truly means to walk between worlds. We'll have conversations about the right things that most people are afraid to talk about: the dark nights, the spiritual awakenings, the grief, the healing, the gifts, the lessons, and the profound journey of coming home to yourself. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been beneath the conditioning, the wounds, the expectations, and the fear. If you've ever felt different, if you've ever questioned reality, if you've ever known there was more waiting for you beyond the life you've been told to live, this podcast is for you. The awakening has already begun. The question is, are you ready to answer the call? I'm your host of the podcast, Haylz, founder of the Heyoka Shaman, YouTuber for the last 7 years, author, and medium. This is the Heyoka Shaman Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to episode number 5. This one's called Trusting Your Intuition. And we're going to talk about learning to hear your inner voice. So stay tuned and we will dive in deep in this one and give you some insight into what all this means. What is your intuition? Let's go. Welcome back to the Heyoka Shaman Podcast. I'm your host, Haylz, and wherever you're joining me from today, thank you for choosing to spend this time with me. If you've been following this journey, you'll know that each episode has built upon the last. We stepped out of the spiritual closet. We answered the awakening call. We walked through the dark night of the soul. We discovered that our triggers can become some of our greatest teachers. And today, we arrive at something that sits at the heart of every spiritual journey: trusting your intuition. Because after you've questioned everything, after you've let go of old identities, after you've begun healing, one question remains: can you trust yourself? Not your fears, not other people's opinions, not society's expectations, but your inner knowing, that gut feeling, that just I know. Today's episode is about reconnecting with that quiet voice that's been with you all along. Let's begin. So I want to talk about how we actually are all born intuitive. And I don't believe intuition is necessarily a gift reserved for a select few. I believe it's something every human being is born with. Think about children. Before they're taught what to think, they're naturally curious. They're deeply present. They often sense when someone feels safe or unsafe, sad or happy. They trust what they feel without needing evidence. But then life happens. They're conditioned. They're conditioned at school. They're conditioned by generational patterns. And they're told to stop being so sensitive. We're taught to ignore our feelings. We're rewarded for logic and criticized for emotion. We begin outsourcing our wisdom. We ask everyone else what we should do. We search for permission. We seek certainty. And over time, the relationship with our intuition grows quieter, not because it disappears, but because we've stopped listening. I want to talk about what intuition really feels like. People often imagine intuition as something dramatic, a booming voice, a vision, a supernatural experience. Sometimes it can feel profound, but more often than not, intuition is incredibly ordinary. It's the quiet feeling that says, take a different road home, call that friend. This opportunity feels right. This relationship doesn't feel safe. It doesn't usually scream, fear screams, anxiety spirals, ego argues, intuition softly whispers. That's why stillness matters. If our lives are constantly filled with noise, distraction, and urgency, it's very difficult to hear the quiet wisdom within us. And I've heard people talk about how they're being forced to rest or they're constantly being injured. It's because spirit is trying to get them out of the chaos and guide them through their intuition. So if you've been someone who's had injury after injury after injury, it's because spirit is wanting you to go within, listen to your intuition, listen to your own voice, listen to your soul, and not be influenced by external circumstances, not be distracted, not be, be calm amongst the chaos. Intuition is so powerful, and I've been on a huge journey with intuition. So I want to talk about intuition versus fear, because this is where it becomes quite confusing, right? Sometimes, you feel triggered and you're like, that is that my intuition or is that my fear? Is this person going to hurt me? Does this person create a safe space for me? And sometimes we confuse the two and then we put up boundaries when we're actually listening to our fear instead of our intuition. So one of the biggest questions people ask is, how do I know if it's intuition or fear? So here's what I've noticed. Fear tends to feel urgent. It wants an immediate answer. It catastrophizes. So catastrophe, it's a major catastrophe. Oh my God, meltdown. It tells stories about everything that could go wrong. Intuition feels different. It's calm. It's simple. It's steady. It doesn't need to convince you. It simply offers guidance. That doesn't mean intuition is always comfortable. Sometimes it leads us towards difficult conversations, big decisions, or unfamiliar paths. But even then, there's often a quiet sense of clarity beneath the discomfort. Learning to tell the difference takes practice. And it's okay if you don't get it right every time. Trust grows through experience. So I want to talk about why we stop trusting ourselves and then we try and seek external validation or external guidance, which, I highly don't recommend because everyone's journey is unique. And what your friends might be dealing with and going through, their social patterns, their conditioning, all of that has to come into play, their trauma, and the advice that they're giving you is based on their own experiences, their own perceptions, and you don't want to be taking on someone else's consciousness. So that's why spirit always guides you. Go within. You're going to get the guidance from us, from the spirit guides, from the ancestors, for your highest possible timeline. It's always good to vent to friends and take on separate opinions and but just don't form your whole decision off someone else's influence. So I want to talk about why we stop trusting ourselves. Many of us didn't stop trusting ourselves overnight. We learned to doubt ourselves over years. Maybe someone constantly questions your decisions. Maybe you were told your feelings were wrong. Maybe your instincts were dismissed. Or perhaps you ignored your intuition once and the outcome left you feeling disappointed. These experiences can make us believe we can't trust ourselves. But losing confidence in your intuition doesn't mean it's gone. It simply means the relationship needs rebuilding. And like any relationship, It begins with listening. So that's why it's really important to seek stillness, meditation, go within, and rebuild that relationship with your intuition and become calm amongst the chaos. Go out in nature, get grounded, all these type of things, help us listen to that inner guidance and reconnect with our intuition when sometimes we've chosen fear over intuition. So let's talk about the signs and the synchronicities. Many people describe meaningful coincidences that seem too perfect to ignore. Meeting the right person at the right time, finding the exact book you needed, hearing the same message repeated in different places. Some people interpret these as spiritual signs. Others see them as reminders to pay closer attention. Whatever your perspective, these moments can encourage reflection. Rather than becoming dependent on signs, use them as invitations to slow down and ask, what feels meaningful about this? What is this moment drawing my attention towards? Sometimes the greatest guidance comes from not the insight or the sign itself, but from the awareness it awakens within you. So let's talk about how we can strengthen that intuition, that connection, because your intuition is your connection to spirit, source, a higher power, your ancestors, your spirit guides, whoever is on, the other side guiding you. That is what intuition is. It's your protection. So it needs to be treated sacredly. You need to, it's like a radio frequency that you can tune into, right? So you've got to get off all the other channels. You've got to get off all the other distractions and tune in. So how do we strengthen that? The beautiful thing about intuition is that it grows stronger the more you practice listening. So, like I said earlier, spending time in nature, meditating, journaling. Notice how your body responds to different people and environments. Pay attention to what brings a sense of peace and calm, and ask yourself simple questions throughout the day. What feels aligned? What feels true? And what choice honors my values? You don't need to predict the future. You simply need to become present enough to notice what's already here. Intuition isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting the next step. Now I want to talk about discernment and it being connected to spiritual wisdom. So trusting your intuition doesn't mean believing every thought that enters your mind. It also doesn't mean abandoning critical thinking. Discernment is one of the greatest spiritual skills we can develop. It allows us to stay open-hearted without becoming naive, to remain curious without accepting every idea uncritically, to listen deeply while also checking whether someone aligns with our values, our experiences, and our reality. Intuition and discernment work together. One opens the heart, the other keeps us grounded, but both are important. I want to talk about coming home to yourself. Perhaps the greatest gift of intuition isn't that it tells us what will happen next. Perhaps its greatest gift is that it brings us back to ourselves. Because every time you choose to honor your inner knowing, you strengthen that trust. Every time you choose authenticity over approval, you strengthen trust. Every time you pause before reacting, you strengthen trust. Intuition isn't asking you to become someone different. It's inviting you to remember the wisdom that has always been within you. And those of us who are old souls, star seeds, light workers, and we've been in many different incarnations before, we have this inner knowing of what's wrong or what's right, even if someone externally is trying to influence us down the wrong path. Like there's been so many times in my life where people have tried to tell me something and I'm like, yeah, nah, that's not right. And they'll be so self-righteous and set in their ways. And they'll be like, you need to do this, or you need to do that. But my inner knowing in my soul was like, no, I don't. That's not the path for me. And you need to just accept that that's where those people are on their journey and they may be a little bit behind you. You've already learned those lessons. So if you go against your intuition and your inner knowing is like, nah, I don't think that doesn't feel right for me. You've probably already learnt those lessons in past lives or previous situations. And, you've got someone coming in who is a friend that you respect, but they're on a different level spiritually, karmically to you. And if you take on board their advice, you'll be backwards. You'll be going through lessons that you've already learned, and then you'll go through a cycle and you'll be like, I already knew that this was the wrong path for me. Why'd I listen to that person? And so the closing message for you to think about and reflect upon is, if there's one thing I'd like to take away from today's conversation, well, I'd like you to take away from this conversation, it's this. You don't need to have every answer today. You don't need to know what your life will look like 5 years from now. You don't need certainty before taking the first step. Sometimes all you need is the courage to trust the next quiet whisper. That whisper may not explain your entire journey, your purpose, your path, but it often knows exactly where the next step begins. And over time, those small moments of trust become a life lived in alignment. Thank you for joining me for episode 5 of the Heyoka Shaman Podcast. If this episode had resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who's learning to trust themselves again. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please follow the show, subscribe to our channel, and leave a review or a comment. It helps these conversations reach more people walking their own path of healing and awakening. Until next time, protect your energy, heal what calls for your attention, align with your truth, and remember, your intuition isn't something you need to find. It's something you remember. I'm Haylz, and I'll meet you between the worlds. Thanks for listening.